down and become more accurate is to use a different type of imagery called LiDAR, which allows you to really focus in on changes in the ground surface, and CBRN has done that now in this area. We'll show you some of the results of their work. Okay, coastal erosion. Well, first thing you have to understand in terms of how fast our coastline will erode in Glace Bay is to look at the geology. Now, where would this be?
Cape Smoky?
Right on, yep. So here's the Cabot Trail going over top of Cape Smoky. Here's the provincial park right in here, and Ingonish would be over here. But here it's all formed of granite. Extremely hard, very low erodibility. Now if we had that in Glace Bay, we'd be in good shape, but what we do have is sedimentary rock. Sandstone, siltstone, shale, coal, that sort of stuff. It's much more easily erodible than granite is. And so we've got a little bit more erodible coastline to deal with. Now another thing you have to think about is not only what type of rock it is, but what's the structure like in the rock. And where would this be?
Lingan Line?
Right on, yep. Lingan, Phelan, power plant. Now, in New Waterford, we've got a fairly straight coastline here. And that's because the rock itself, so if you think of a book, and all the different strata in the rock as the pages in a book. The book is sort of laying parallel to the shore, and it's oriented so that it dips off to the water. By so doing, it gives us a little bit of a different erosional pattern than we have in Glace Bay. So if we take a look at that area there, you can get to see how the dip of the beds is dipping off there. So anything that's eroded falls is just flowing right down into the water. The waves come and erode it away and always keep a fairly steep face there. Now, the interesting thing is when you have that sort of a situation, the rock starts to, as it erodes, it starts to slip down those bedding planes out to the water. And as it starts to slip, it creates these big rills and gouges parallel to the coastline. So in this case, if you had a house here and you thought, well, the edge of the shore is out here, no. You don't have to worry until this gets to here. Well, that's not the case. In this case, you start getting these big rills formed way back in from the shore, 50 to 100 feet in. So then all of a sudden, where your house and where your infrastructure is really becomes of importance. It's not so much, am I right at the edge? It's how close to the edge I'm at. And then you can actually see these big blocks sliding down. And once they get down here, you get the base of the block here, and all the stuff above it has now been eroded out and transported out to sea. Now, where would this be? Well, this is Table Head. Here's the old number 26 colliery here. Now, in Glace Bay, instead of those parts of the rock strata running parallel to the shore, they come out at right angles to the shore, which is why we get all these promontories sticking out in Glace Bay, entirely different than New Waterford. And this rock dips off in this direction. So it creates a little bit different erosional profile. So if you're walking along the edge, and most of you probably have done this, what we get is you get mudstones and shales figuratively easily erodible. The waves undermine them. But then we get these competent sandstone layers with big cracks in them. So as this stuff gets eroded and undermined, those big competent slabs of sandstone just come out and fall down and create these big slabs we see along the shore. And at times we get springs popping out along the base, which help to undermine it. In the wintertime, you see these as big icings, so we get frost action. And then certainly one of the things that Kyle mentioned, this is along the Glace Bay coast I took just last Friday when there was a good blow on, but this is the middle of winter. This is wide open to wave action, where normally, and here's Bridgeport Basin, and here's Dominion Beach, normally at this time of year we get all sorts of pack ice off there, offshore, which helps to protect the shoreline from big wave erosion. Well, if you noticed in the news about a week ago, they said there's no pack ice in the Gulf of St. Lawrence right now. They're concerned about the impact on the seals, but it's also the impact in terms of those big wave actions during the wintertime on our shoreline. And certainly later on, we get these big growlers coming in, and they limit the amount of wave action that can actually reach the shore. In terms of natural erosion rate then, what I wanted to do is give you some handle on that. So here I found this in an old magazine. So this is Table Head. That's what it looked like in 1917, 1918, 1921. So that's a fairly extensive amount of erosion, and that's what it looks like right now. And if you look at the amount of shoreline erosion, Glace Bay and New Waterford, that roughly comes out to about 0.3 meters to 1 meters every year. That's an average rate. Now probably all of you could say, well, I know a spot where it's an awful lot faster than that. And you're right, you will get some areas certainly that are more easily erodible depending upon how the rock juts out and the nature of the rock, whether it's mudstone shale or competent sandstone. But that's an average one to deal with. How faster that's going to become with sea level rise, we don't know. It will become faster, we just don't know by how much. And of course, as Kyle mentioned, we're going to get more increase in storms, more frequency of these higher storm surges. So here's the Glace Bay coastline. There's the old former number 26 collier in the background. And we were doing some work in at that area. This is what normal sea level would be like when Hurricane Hortense came out, September 2002. Same spot, between the storm surge and the wave action, we're getting erosion much higher up on the coast. And the erosion rate will certainly increase considerably as we get more and more of these storms. And if you remember what I said, what used to be 3.6 meter storm surge once every 4 years, by 2100 is going to be every year. So that's certainly going to increase the rate of erosion along the shoreline. But we also took a look at Cape Breton and we asked the computer show us all the roads on the island and then show us all the roads that could be inundated if we happen to get a 10 meter sea level rise. So that's about 5 meters or so, and then add a 3 meter storm surge on top of it. And you can see there are quite a number around Glace Bay, but as Kyle had mentioned, we really don't, you all know about that, because we certainly have the North Street situation where it's certainly underlining and North Street's been closed. So there's no question that roads are a situation. Either you flood them or erode them. But in Glace Bay, we have to take into account some other infrastructure. So for example, here's the old former number 26 colliery, the mine pool treatment plant, and way over on the right side is the old burn site for Glace Bay. But interestingly enough, I'm not sure if you know about it, but there's about 100,000 bags of Kurdistan oil buried in that site as well. It's from the Kurdistan oil spill cleanup back in the late 70s. And so needless to say, if we get a lot of coastline erosion, there's a lot of other infrastructure other than just roads that we have to think about the impact of. Coastal flooding, well, we certainly have 3 areas around Glace Bay that we have to worry about: Bridgeport Basin, Glace Bay Harbor, and Big Glace Bay Lake. Certainly Glace Bay Harbor is one. Even if we assume a 2 meter sea level rise and then a 3 meter surge on top of it, well, certainly that's going to have a lot of impact and quite an amount of infrastructure all around the harbor. Something else you may want to consider, this is Dominion Beach, but over in Dominion and Glace Bay on this side, it's all under central water, developed from a water supply inland. But down along Lingan Road in here, everybody's on individual domestic wells. So if sea level rise and sea level comes in here, the question will be, what impact will that have on the aquifer that people are drawing water from? And there are an awful lot of estuaries, and in the Grenora Lakes they call them barochois, and there's a created, so here's the Dominion Beach in here, it's creating these big quiet conditions in behind, and some people will say that these are actually nurseries for freshwater and marine aquatic life, because it's away from the high energy wave environment from outside, and it's there for all the nutrients being brought in by the river systems. So if these bars get flooded out from sea level rise, what will be the impact on those nurseries? Certainly the bars are used for recreation, like Dominion Beach. You've seen what happens when we get the larger storm surges on there. And to say that these beaches actually act as a protection to limit the amount of storm energy or waves that can get far inland. And here's an example of that sophisticated LiDAR imagery that Cape Breton Regional Municipality now has flown in specific areas. And so what they did was to say, okay, let's take a 3 meter storm surge, which is used to happen once every 40 years. By 2100 it'll happen every year. As you can see, it completely inundates the bar and allows the water to surge in and move in here. So certainly impact on these big barrier beaches is going to be something we're going to have to think about in terms of how we adapt. And the last big thing that not many other urban areas like Glace Bay would have to deal with, and that's the